Look, I'm going to level with you. GoPro is in a lot of trouble right now. And the Chinese manufacturers are breathing down their neck, their share prices are way down, and it's been almost 2 years since we've seen a Hero Black release from them. And this is GoPro's best chance at setting things right. This is the new Mission 1 Pro. Sure, this little guy is expensive, but it produces the nicest looking footage I have ever seen from an action camera. The question is that going to be enough for GoPro to right its ship? Well, I'm Jordan Drake, this is PetaPixel, and look at this whole frame is 8K open gate. Wow.
B&H is a wonderful place to get pretty much anything you can think of when it comes to photographic gear, videographic gear, and professional audio equipment. They've got a huge store with tons of stock, and right now there's a really great way to buy stuff at B&H. Just get one of their Payboo credit cards because this gives you two big advantages. So first, you can buy all of your gear and save the sales tax. B&H will refund the sales tax back to you when you make your purchases. To check your eligibility for Save the Tax benefits, visit bhphoto.com/payboo, or you have another option. You can finance expensive purchases over 6 months or a year using your B&H Payboo credit card, and this just makes it a little bit easier to spread those costs over a longer period of time. But as always, remember that this is a credit card, so you want to use it responsibly, and you do have to get approved for this card. So to learn more, go to bhphoto.com/payboo. So look into getting your own B&H Payboo credit card today. It is provided to you by Comenity Capital Bank.
Now I'm approaching this review a little different from most of them because right alongside the Mission 1 Pro, I've also got the older GoPro Hero 13 Black. And this is going to stand in for a lot of similar priced, similar performing action cameras. And what I really want to see is in which situations do you really see a benefit moving over to the more expensive Mission 1 Pro? And also, are there any limitations? Now, I should mention the field of view and aspect ratios of these two cameras are a little bit different, but there's going to be big enough differences in the actual quality of the footage. I think it's going to be very apparent. Oh hey, it's Jordan from the future who's editing this video, and before we get started with the review, I'm just going to warn you, I keep referring to this camera as the Key Mission 1 Pro, not the Mission 1 Pro. I don't know why I was reminded of Nikon's failed attempt at making an action camera, but I just kept doing it over and over. There is a correction at the bottom of the screen letting you know what camera I'm actually referring to, but I'm very sorry for this. I don't know why I did it, and I hope this isn't an omen for GoPro's chances going forward. All right, back to the review. What is it about the Action 1 Pro that justifies the higher price tag and sets it apart from other action cameras? It really comes down to the 8K compatible Type 1 sensor that we have in here. Now the sensor on this is substantially larger than what we see in the Hero 13 Black and the competing action cameras from Insta360 and DJI. That means we're going to get sharper video, we're going to get better low light performance, and so much of a dynamic range expansion, they've actually had to release a new log profile with this, the GP Log 2, to accommodate the advertised 14 stops of dynamic range that we see in this camera. I should point out this same sensor is going to be found in the other two members of the Key Mission family, starting with the Key Mission 1 Not Pro, which is the exact same camera that we're talking about here, except with some of the higher end recording modes removed from it. As well, there's going to be a Key Mission 1 ILC. Now this is basically the same camera with the lens removed and a micro 4/3 mount in its place, but this is a dumb mount. There's no electrical connections on it, so you'll only be able to use manual or adapted lens, and I think this camera is incredibly niche. If you're looking for a step up over the regular action cameras, the Key Mission 1 Pro is the one most people should be looking at. In terms of the design of this camera, imagine they just took a Hero Black and beefed it up a little bit. This thing weighs 207 grams, which is 80 grams more than a Hero 13 Black, and it's immediately apparent as soon as you grab the camera that it's physically bigger and quite a bit heavier. It has the same basic interfaces we've seen before. So there's a touch screen, and then there's two physical buttons, one for recording or taking photos and one for modes or your power switch. What I do really like is these are now larger and kind of separated from the body a little bit, so they're easier to find if you're wearing gloves. And beneath the familiar waterproof battery door, you're going to find a removable lithium battery as well as the micro SD card slot. This has no internal battery and no internal storage as well. This also maintains the wonderful dual screen interface that we've seen on previous cameras. So on the back, you've got a 2.6-inch touchscreen camera you'll use to control most of the camera settings. On the front of the camera, we've got a smaller 1.4-inch display that's really useful for just making sure you're recording, checking your composition, things like that. And at the bottom, we have the same mounting system we saw in the 13 Black, which means you can actually connect it to 3 different types of mounts, either a 1/4-20 tripod screw, the classic GoPro finger lock, or the new magnetic mounts as well. Now, of course, this being a GoPro, it's extremely durable, and without using an underwater case, this camera is waterproof down to actually 20 meters, which is twice as deep as what we saw before with the GoPro Hero 13 Pro. You'll probably be fine with that for most situations unless you're actually scuba diving. And if that is the case, you can grab the underwater housing, which will get you down to 60 meters of waterproofing, which is close to 200 feet. That's pretty deep. Okay, let's talk about this lens here, which is sticking way further out from the body than what we saw before on the Hero Black series. And this little hood is included as well to keep you from touching the lens and also help with lens flare, things like that. Now, one unfortunate consequence of the move to the larger sensor on this camera is it pushes the minimum focus way back. Here we're looking at 2 feet away from the camera on the Key Mission 1, as opposed to 1 foot away on the GoPro 13 Black. And this really changes the way that you shoot with the camera, because when I have a very wide lens, my first instinct is to get nice and close to my subject so they fill a lot of the frame. But in a lot of cases, that means they're gonna be out of focus with this camera. So if you wanna mount it to a helmet and see the locations around you, it's gonna do an awesome job. But if you wanna flip it around, well, you're gonna be out of focus in this camera, unlike other action cameras. Let's look at some of the recording modes that this new sensor brings to the table. And the one I've been using the most, and honestly the headline feature of this camera, is the ability to record 8K 4:3 open gate. This is actually giving you a big detail improvement over what we saw before on the 13 Black with its 5.3K open gate recording. There is actually a lot more detail here, and it gives you a lot of potential for reframing your shot, or if you want to output horizontal and vertical clips of the same footage. There's another new mode as well, which is the 4K 4:3 open gate recording mode. And this is going to give you less resolution, but still maintain the full image of the sensor and that 4:3 aspect ratio. And the big benefit to switching over here is you can record at faster frame rates. So while the 8K open gate recording is capped at 30 frames per second, here you can do 4K open gate all the way up to 120 frames per second. Now, you're not going to be able to crop into this footage nearly as much, but it can still be useful if you're filming something extreme and you want a little bit of headroom on the top and the bottom of the frame, just in case your subject moves through there. Or alternatively, you like the old 4:3 aspect ratio, like a lot of classic movies and old TV shows. Now, as you can see here, this camera also offers your classic 4K recording in a standard 16:9 aspect ratio. But what's really cool is it can do that up to 240 frames per second. And this isn't some dedicated slow motion mode. It'll just do long recordings of this with audio. So this is great if I'm going out and shooting any kind of action. I can just let the camera roll for long stretches, and I know I can always cut to extreme slow motion whenever I want to. What's that? You want even more slow motion flexibility? Well, there's also some options available in the slow-mo burst mode. And what this is going to do is just record 10 seconds of footage to the internal buffer and then afterwards write those to the memory card. And you've got 2 different settings going in completely different directions here. You can record the 8K video up to 60 frames per second in a short burst. It gives you very detailed footage that you can slow down to around half speed in a standard timeline. But the major headline feature here is if you're willing to go down to 1080p, you can record up to 960 frames per second. Now, 10 seconds of that is going to play back at over 6 minutes of footage in a 24p timeline. It's extremely slow. Now, the quality is definitely a drop off from the standard record modes, but this is an aesthetic you're just not going to find anywhere else. You want almost 1,000 frames per second, you're going to have to look at the Key Mission 1. A big reason you might be looking at a camera with a larger sensor like this is for the benefits of dynamic range. So I did a test here in 4K comparing the Hero 13 Black in its GP log to some footage from the Key Mission 1 in its GP log 2. And you can see the more expensive camera is definitely holding on to the highlights quite a bit better. And if we look at the deepest shadows, they are considerably cleaner. So that just means more usable dynamic range overall in this camera. But there is a weird quirk to it. And one of the main reasons that you'll be looking at this is the ability to record 8K and reframe in post. But if we look at the deepest shadows of 8K compared to 4K recording, you can see the shadows are quite a bit noisier in the 8K mode. That means the 8K recordings have less usable dynamic range than the 4K modes, and that's a real drawback because it means now you have to choose which compromise you want to make. Do you want to go higher resolution with less dynamic range or lower resolution with more dynamic range? The other thing I want to point out that's really frustrating for me is with the default firmware, whether using the camera or the GoPro Quick app, you can't see a histogram. You actually have to download GoPro Lab software in order to access that. And with a camera with this much dynamic range, you really want to be able to properly meter your scene. It's a real frustration that's not included as default firmware straight out of the box. Another benefit of the big sensor on here is low light performance. So let's take a look at a comparison with the 13 Black, which I should mention has a slightly brighter lens. That's an f2.5 as opposed to the f2.8 that we see on the Key Mission 1. But looking at them side by side at 1600 ISO, I mean, you can just see there is more detail, cleaner shadows in the Key Mission 1 footage, despite having the slightly slower lens on it. But there's also a dedicated low light mode where it's going to do a little bit of frame blending. This is going to mean you can't record in 8K or shoot 4K faster than 60 frames per second. But comparing the low light mode from the Key Mission 1 to the Hero Black, it is just night and day. We are getting dramatically better low light performance. That means this is one of the only action cams where you can bring it into legitimately low light and get usable footage out of it. This is very impressive. We have to talk about audio as well. That is something that GoPro has really been emphasizing through the last few years. And the internal microphone on this is actually pretty good. It's not the mic's fault that the traffic noise is much louder than the birds chirping and the water lapping at the shore that I'd rather be listening to, but it does a pretty good job. But of course, it's not going to be great at isolating human speech. You'll want to use an external microphone for that. So this gives you a few different ways that you can attach those. You can just use the USB-C port on the side of the camera. This does mean you've got to keep the camera open. You're no longer going to be waterproof when using that, but you can plug USB-C mics in directly or use a USB-C to 3.5 millimeter jack for all kinds of other analog microphones. Also, if you have a transmitter that supports Bluetooth transmission, well, you can just send that audio straight into the GoPro and maintain your weather sealing in those situations. I love the fact that this camera can actually record 4 tracks of audio, so you can have a mic plugged in through USB-C, simultaneously capture the internal camera audio, so if you want to fade in a little bit of ambient sound, you have the ability to do that. And you know, if you're using this to record any kind of extreme, radical, or tubular activity where people might suddenly start screaming unexpectedly, you'll love the ability to record the audio in 32-bit float, giving you a little bit more headroom so your audio doesn't clip when suddenly everything gets real loud when someone almost dies. I should also briefly touch on photography, which I don't find terribly useful with the ultra-wide lenses that we see on action cameras, but if you do like shooting ultra-wide focal lengths, you can capture 50 megapixel raw photos on this camera, and they look pretty good, like a Type 1 photo camera would deliver, but with a very wide-angle field of view. But if you're looking for better ergonomics, it is kind of nice that GoPro makes a specific case that gets you a much more comfortable grip and a big shutter release that physically pushes the shutter on top of this camera. It's big, it's bulky, it looks a little bit silly, but it does make it more comfortable when you want to do a little bit of photography with this camera, and you can also use it as a video grip. But I think part of the appeal of these cameras is the small size, so I don't think I'd be using this cage all that often. Okay, I guess it's time to take this camera back inside so that I can run some overheating tests. All right, we have to talk about overheating because it's been a real concern for GoPro cameras in the past. Now, I should mention, when I was out doing my tests and recording all my talking points with the Mission 1 Pro, I didn't encounter any overheating issues. The camera didn't even get particularly hot while I was out shooting, but I wanted to do some controlled tests indoors at room temperature with the battery door closed. And kicking things off, I did run into some problems with the 4K 240 recording where I'm just running a continuous, not in a slow motion record mode. There I was able to get just over 12 minutes of runtime. So this is not something that you're going to want to record long stretches of in that mode. Now, if you can dial that back a little bit, recording the 4K 120p mode, there I was able to get 47 minutes of continuous runtime. So that's a dramatic improvement. If you do need a little bit of length in your recordings or you're shooting in extreme heat, it might be worth dialing that back to 4K 120p. For high resolution recording on this, I recorded 8K at 30 frames per second. Remember, the 8K 60 is limited to just 10-second bursts on it. And there I was able to record for 51 minutes. So overheating may be a concern if you're in very hot environments or recording something really long like a concert, but for most clips, it's not really going to be an issue. But if you dial things back to more standard frame rates, like shooting 4K 24p, well then I was able to record for over 2 hours before I just got bored. The battery still had like 30% left on it, and the camera wasn't even that hot to the touch. So for doing longer performances, just stick to more standardized frame rates and you'll be able to record very long presentations or events. All right, there weren't a lot of surprises when it comes to my impressions of the GoPro Mission 1 Pro because it does everything that it's advertised. It gives you sharper video that's better in low light with more dynamic range in a very familiar form factor. So if you have the money for it, then this is definitely the action camera to buy, right? Well, it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. Absolutely, if I want to record an environment that's quite low light or with a lot of contrast, I'm going to get phenomenal results out of this camera. But it's really the minimum focus that was driving me crazy with this camera, because it really prevents you from putting the GoPro in a lot of creative, odd angles with an immediate subject in the foreground. And even vlogging was very difficult. I had a fully stretched arm with a big selfie stick, because if I held the camera comfortably, I was within that minimum focus distance. It really restricts the flexibility of this camera. The other competition for this camera isn't just coming from other action cameras, but also the latest crop of compact vlogging cameras with gimbals like the upcoming DJI Pocket 4P or Insta360's Luna Ultra. Those cameras are going to deliver very similar image quality to the GoPro with the added flexibility of having that articulating separate video head. But the GoPro does have more advanced slow motion capabilities, as well as the rugged and waterproof body that's going to be required by the action sports aficionados that are likely looking at this. So there's definitely going to be an audience of people who will be well served by this camera, but it's a small one, and I just don't foresee this camera being a big enough hit to turn things around for GoPro. But I want to know, what do you think? Has this revitalized your interest in the action camera market? You should let us know in the comments below. And we're going to be talking about these gimbal cameras, action cameras, all that kind of stuff on the PetaPixel podcast. You can watch it right here on this same YouTube channel or listen to it on all of your favorite podcasting apps. And if you like the work that we're doing, the best way to support us is with a PetaPixel membership. For only $3 a month or $30 out of the year, you're not just doing this out of the kindness of your heart, but look at this raft of awesome perks that go alongside a PetaPixel membership, and it's a great way to support us. But thank you so much for watching this episode. I will see you all again soon. I'm hosting another episode this week on PetaPixel.